This week we are in Parshat Tetzaveh. We continue reading about different aspects of the construction of the tabernacle and its furnishings. And in particular, to begin with, this description of the clothing of the priest. You shall make the robe of the ephod of pure blue. The opening for the head shall be in the middle of it. The opening shall have a binding of woven work around about. It shall be like the opening of a coat of mail, so that it does not tear. On its hem make pomegranates of blue, purple, and crimson yarns all around the hem, with bells of gold between them all, a golden bell and a pomegranate, a golden bell and a pomegranate, all around the hem of the robe. Aaron shall wear it while officiating, so that the sound of it is heard when he comes into the sanctuary before the Lord, and when he goes out, that he may not die. You shall make the frontlet of pure gold and engrave on it the seal inscription that says, "Holy to the Lord." Suspend it on a cord of blue so that it may remain on the headdress. It shall remain on the front of the headdress. It shall be on Aaron's forehead, that Aaron may take away any sin arising from the holy things that the Israelites consecrate. From any of their sacred donations, it shall be on his forehead at all times to win acceptance for them before the Lord. You shall make the fringed tunic of fine linen, and you shall make the headdress of fine linen, and you shall make the sash of embroidered work. And for Aaron's sons also you shall make tunics, and make sashes for them, and make turbans for them, for dignity and adornment. Put these on your brother Aaron and on his sons as well. Anoint them and ordain them, and consecrate them to serve me as priests. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkanotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkanotecha Yisrael. How beautiful are your tents, O Jacob, and your dwelling places, O Israel. Services in the morning, davening in the morning, often start with this blessing that in the Torah, Balaam pronounces upon the camp of the people of Israel. One reason for that, perhaps, is that the word for tents is often read in this context to mean yeshivas, and your dwelling places, mishkanotecha. You can hear the root shechina, shechen, presence. That word is read in Midrash to be synagogues. So, how beautiful are your yeshivas and synagogues? So, we come in here to pray in this beautiful place. So that is one reason why services begin with that. And even if the place where we're davening is not so beautiful physically, just because the people are gathered to study and pray, that would make it a beautiful place. As I said this week to inmates in the prison chapel that I visit in the prison this week, I said to them in the chapel, let us imagine that this is a beautiful space we are in. Let us imagine, because we're here davening and studying. This week's Parsha continues with the description of the tabernacle environment that leads into the temple in Jerusalem later in our history, and then broadly speaking, influences the design of synagogues. In the eternal light over The ark is perhaps the greatest example of that sort of architectural continuity. And in fact, that is how this parsha begins. It says, instruct the Israelites. Actually, it says, Tetzaveh is a mitzvah. Command the Israelites to bring you clear oil of beaten olives for lighting, for kindling lamps regularly. Aaron and his son shall set them up in the tent of meeting outside the curtain, which is over the ark of the covenant, to burn from evening to morning before the Lord. The Ner Tamid. That, as I said, is perhaps the greatest example of architectural continuity between the tabernacle and our synagogues. But so too is the display of the seven-branched menorah, which synagogues often display, and which was used to illuminate the inside of the temple in Jerusalem. But the practice is usually to fashion the seven-branch menorahs displayed in the synagogue to somehow look different. Something has to be different about it from what stood in the temple in Jerusalem, just to make the clear distinction that our synagogues still are not the temple in Jerusalem. This week's Parsha has a particular emphasis on the clothes that the priests wear, and the design of those clothes have had particular influence on synagogue art and design. In particular, the way we dress the Torah scrolls is influenced by the way the priests were dressed. The Torah has crowns like the priest, is dressed in a robe like the high priest, sometimes with pomegranates and bells. The Torah often is given a breastplate like the priest. The high priest had 12 stones on the breastplate, one for each of the 12 tribes. And in particular, at Temple Beth Shalom, every time I see the doors of the ark, it always reminds me of the design of that priestly breastplate. It's not coincidental that the design of the synagogue and the garments on the Torah scroll reflect elements of design of the temple and its furnishings. Our devotional prayers are built upon references to the devotional sacrifices prescribed for the temple. In particular, the timing for the recitation of our most central prayer is set to the timing of the sacrificial ritual. I'm referring to the Amida, the chain of blessings we say usually while standing facing towards the Temple Mount where the sacrifices were offered. Every day in the temple and in the tabernacle, as described by the Torah in this week's Parsha, there was a morning sacrifice and an afternoon sacrifice. And so every day, traditionally, there is a morning Amida and an afternoon Amida recited out loud. In the evening in the temple, the fire on the altar would continue to burn into the night. And so we have an evening Amida that is traditionally said silently, but not out loud, just as we did tonight. And then on Shabbat and holidays, there was an additional sacrifice. And the word for additional is musaf. And so on Shabbat and holidays, there is a musaf Amida. Perhaps the Amida began as a prayer for Jews to say wherever we were outside of the Temple Mount in order to link our thoughts at that moment to what was going on at that time in the temple, even though we were in different physical spaces. And then after the destruction of the temple, the recitation of the Amida continued as a way for us to continue participating in communal devotion, even when we are alone. The Amida on Shabbat and holidays almost always has 7 blessings, leaving out Rosh Hashanah, for 7 is a number of completion. The Amida for every day is called the Shmona Esrei, the 18. And one would think that is because it has 18 blessings, but it has 19 blessings. It once had 18, and then a 19th was added, but it is still called the Shmona Esrei, the 18. Maybe that just says we are resistant to change. Or maybe it's because 18 is chai, 18 is life. And that was so important for us to make the connection between our prayers and life. Too important for us to abandon that connection So our 19 blessings are called the 18. Most of us never regularly get to look at the weekday Amidah. So I want to take this opportunity to very briefly describe that prayer. Every Amidah opens up with the same 3 blessings, and every Amidah closes with the same 3 blessings. So every Amidah opens with a blessing that declares that God is our God and the God of our ancestors. That is the God of our experience and the God we learn about from the traditions of our ancestors' experience. The second blessing focuses on God being the source of all life and the sustainer and animation of all being. And the third blessing of every Amidah is about God's holiness and how we participate somehow in that holiness when we recite our prayers. Skipping now to the end of the Amidah. Every Amidah concludes with basically the same 3 blessings. The third to last blessing states that there is a direct connection between the prayers we say now and the sacrifices our ancestors brought to the tabernacle and the temple. Our worship is one continuity from our past into the present and into our future. The second to last blessing is about gratitude and thanksgiving. And the last blessing of every Amidah is always about Shalom, peace, wholeness, and harmony. And that is significant. Every Amidah ends in a blessing for Shalom, because Shalom is an outward manifestation of God's unity, which is the central point of Jewish spiritual teaching. As we say at the end of the Amidah, at the end of the service, the end of the Aleinu, V'ne'emar, v'haya Adonai, lemelech al kol haaretz, vayom hahu, yeh Adonai echad, u'shmo echad. In that day, God will rule over all the earth, and then God will be one, and God's name will be one. Shalom is an integral outward way of increasing the extent of God's unity in the world. So it is quite appropriate for every Amidah to end with a blessing for Shalom. So I described 3 opening and 3 closing blessings, and that makes a total of 6 blessings. And yeah, it's the middle of the Amidah, which I've skipped over, and it's the middle that tells us which Amidah we are reciting. The Shabbat and holiday Amidah, as I've said, have 7 blessings. So they only have 1 blessing in the middle. And that blessing is about the holiday. On Shabbat, it's about Shabbat. And on Yom Kippur, it's about Yom Kippur. And the festivals, it's about the festivals. The weekday Amidah has 13 blessings in the middle, which speak of our needs for spiritual and physical life throughout the week. And I believe we need to pay attention to the Siddur. We need to study the Siddur. I see the Siddur as the single most important Jewish mystical book hiding in plain sight. Again, I see the Siddur as the single most important Jewish mystical book hiding in plain sight. It says a lot about the nature of what is important in spiritual life, and it's meant for us to recite it so that we become it. We are meant to become the Siddur. It's not about the Siddur it's not about us getting through the Siddur. It's about the Siddur getting through us. It is the text most people see most of the time when they enter into a synagogue. And yet it's the Rodney Dangerfield, to use an old reference, it's the Rodney Dangerfield of texts. It don't get no respect. I don't think it's given the weight it deserves. So we need to pay attention, and in brief sequence, therefore, I will summarize the 13 blessings of the weekday Amidah and describe the thought continuum it creates. It creates a chain. The first of those blessings is giving thanks that we as human beings can have knowledge and understanding. And with that knowledge, then, the second blessing, we are invited to do tshuva, atonement. And following from that atonement, we pray for forgiveness. And then we pray for deliverance from affliction and oppression. And then for healing and sickness. And then for abundance, sustenance, and livelihood. And then for freedom and unity of our people. And then for justice within our community and in the world around us. And then for an end to evil. And then for righteousness within our community. And then for restoration of Jerusalem and of the dignity and glory for the people of Israel that this represents. And then for redemption for the entire world. And then a blessing and a prayer that God hears prayers. So I encourage us all to study the Siddur. That can, if you were able to follow that, it creates a chain of one thought leading into the next. If we study the Siddur and I urge you to study it and to investigate whether or not you think, in short order, this chain of blessings of the Shemona Esrei summarizes our physical and spiritual needs as a community and as individuals. I think the Shemona Esrei does so very well, and that is its strength for us as a daily spiritual practice. The Amidah does not physically involve the blood and guts of animal sacrifice. Religion is about blood and guts, if it's really religion. It's about really serious stuff. It's about life and death. And sacrifices were that. But I don't think most of us want to return to that in a literal way. But we can think of the daily recital of the Amidah as something of a literary performance of the incense that rose upward from its own altar in front of the Ark of the Covenant. One last little passage from this week's Parsha. You shall make an altar for burning incense. Burning incense. Make it of acacia wood. It shall be of a cubit long and a cubit wide. It shall be square, 2 cubits high. Overlay it with pure gold, its top, its sides round about, and its horns, and make a gold molding for it round about. And this incense stand is to be placed in front of the curtain that's in front of the Ark of the Covenant. And I put that together with Psalm 141. It says, let my prayer be set forth as incense before you, and the lifting up of my hands as the evening sacrifice. Let my prayer be set forth as incense before you, the lifting up of my hands as the evening sacrifice. When we recite the Amidah, let us envision it as a content-laden offering of incense. Our prayers are rising upwards. Our words are moving inwards into our own hearts, so that we ourselves can be transformed into the answers to our own prayers. Each of us a walking, talking, living exemplar of Torah, just as much as the high priests of old were, dressed in all their glory and finery in their day. Shabbat Shalom.